And thanks to the work of my parents, our community members, we were taught Gayokono all throughout, from kindergarten up to grade 8 in the classroom. The way that looked like is like the way Gawanago was mentioning yesterday, that you have about a 45-minute class in your school day. You get together maybe 3 times a week with a Kyuga speaker, Gayokono, and they would teach you words, colors, and a few cue phrases. Again, I was super fortunate. I think I was just blessed to be born at the right time. When it came for me to go to high school, our parents and our community advocated for our local high school to teach Ganyo Geha and Gayokono in the high schools. So instead of being forced to learn, the work of my parents, our community members, we were taught Gayokono all throughout, from kindergarten up to grade 8 in the classroom. The way that looked like is like the way Gawanago was mentioning yesterday, that you have about a 45-minute class in your school day. You get together maybe 3 times a week with a Kyuga speaker, Gayokono, and they would teach you words, colors, and a few cue phrases. Again, I was super fortunate. I think I was just blessed to be born at the right time. When it came for me to go to high school, our parents and our community advocated for our local high school to teach Ganyo Geha and Gayokono in the high schools. So instead of being forced to learn another colonizer language, we call it Otsuluni Geha, the French language, we got to learn Gayokono or Ganyo Geha in high school, and obviously earned credits for it. And as amazing and as fortunate as I was to have those experiences, they didn't turn me into a speaker. They were like short-term classes throughout the week where I learned a few key phrases. We didn't have TPR when I was a kid, Lydia, and we didn't have flashcards either. We had pictures and stuff like that, but nothing to the extent of the language resources we see today. So I think when I was about 25, I was working a job in Toronto, and I told my mom, I'm not really happy here. I'm not really sure what I'm doing with my life. I wasn't in university. I wasn't in school. And she said, why don't you come home and try the adult immersion program called Ongowana Ganjokwa? And so I thought, you know what, why don't I? I've had fun in the city. Why don't I come home and try my hand at the language? And I did. Gawanago was my first teacher. She remembers how I fell asleep in a lot of classes. But I loved it. It really woke up my mind in a way that I did not know something was missing. Like I did not know, even though I could say sego to my friends and family, and I could say key phrases, being in the adult immersion program, which was 9:30 to about 3 o'clock, Monday to Friday, September to April, we were immersed in the language, speaking and learning with each other. And so at that point, around 26, 27, excuse me, after 8 months of studying 5 days a week in an immersive environment, I learned to speak, think, and most importantly, dream in Ganyo Geha, our Mohawk language. And as I alluded to a little bit earlier, learning to speak and understand, listening and being able to laugh and joke in our language just filled my heart and filled a hole that I didn't know was even there before I started Ongowana Ganjokwa. I made lifelong friends, and a few years later, I became pregnant with my son, and I was again really fortunate and really blessed that at that time, Six Nations had invested in a language nest, a Ganyo Geha language nest. The program, for those of you that are not familiar with a language nest, the language nest is an intentional environment where we bring together small children to learn the language together with first language speakers, typically with first language speakers. And the point is to help those young children, typically, toddlers to preschool, to become fluent first language speakers and in their language. The activities include singing, dancing, similar to what you would see in, I don't know if it's a national program, but Head Start, where kids come together in a program and they play together, they learn together. So that's what the language nest is, but it's all done in a specific language with language teachers and cultural knowledge holders. So the Six Nations Ganyo Geha language nest was focused not only on nurturing the fluency of the children, it was recognizing that for the children to be fluent, they also needed the parent to have some sort of speaking level. So if a child was to attend, they had to have a parent accompany them throughout that program as well. The language nest ran similar to our adult immersion. We went to the language nest Monday to Friday, 9:30 to about 3. And I think what I really want to emphasize, one of the most important parts about the Language Nest program at Six Nations is that we were paid as parents to be there. They recognized that what we were doing was work and that it was valuable to our community. It wasn't much, but it was a modest, as a single parent at that time, it was enough for us to cover our bills and be there and focus on the language and not have to go and do another part-time job or miss our time at the nest because of financial obligations. So by the time I got to the Language Nest, I was an advanced speaker. I would say about an intermediate speaker. I could speak easily, I could understand easily, and I could also read and write our Ganyageha language. At the time of the Language Nest, Six Nations had only a few first language speakers left, and almost all of them were already committed to other language programs, including our other, we're really blessed at Six Nations. We have 2 other Ganyageha immersion children's programs, elementary, as well as a Gayokono Kyuga program as well. So we did not have the speakers in our community to support the Language Nest, and so we were really blessed that our sister communities, Akwesasne and Ganawage, we had 2 fluent first language speaker from Akwesasne and a second language advanced speaker from Ganawage join the Nest at Six Nations. So they traveled to our community and stayed in our community to help us learn. So I just want to explain a little bit more about what our Language Nests look like. Language Nests look very different in different communities. Right now, I think Akwesasne and Ganawage have Language Nests as well as Oneida. And they look different from what our Six Nations Language Nest looked at the time that I was a participant. So the first year, it was just parents and children. It was great, but we recognized we have so many speakers that could benefit from being here in an immersive program. So we opened up enrollment to not only parents and their children, but also auntie and uncles, adults who were language learners but didn't have any children, so that they could come. And you know how important aunties and uncles are in children's lives and how helpful they can be throughout the child's life. So we would have those parents, children's, auntie, and uncles, about 12 of us each year. And occasionally we'd have special guests, other language learners from other programs that wanted to hear the immersive environment. It was really the only place on Six Nations that you could hear a first language speaker that wasn't a part of the school program. So our Language Nest was literally a home in our community. We had 2 families that had a home they weren't using that invited us to use it. We had 2 different houses throughout the time that I was there. They were beautiful. They were like visiting your auntie. They had kitchens. They had a huge backyard. They had gardens. The second one, we were by the Grand River. Just a really cozy environment that had enough space for us to be doing different things at the same time. So myself as an advanced speaker, I would be sitting close to the first language speaker, hanging out, learning with her. Some of our parents with younger children, they might be in another room, the living rooms, for example, playing games, learning songs with their younger children, while the older ones, those with older children, might be outside playing lacrosse, learning how to encourage our kids. Lacrosse is big on Six Nations, so it's one of the themes people want to learn language for. So each activity, because we had so much space, we had 2 teachers, 1 first language speaker and the second advanced language speaker. So they would often split up to help out the different groups and different activities. And I think the other second point I think was really important about the Language Nest for us is that we had not only a first language speaker, but we also had an advanced second language speaker that could translate translations from our first language speakers. I know many of you are teachers, and when we're first beginning, we often try to translate word for word, and it makes sense for us because we speak English and we know what we're saying. But if we're trying to say that to a first language speaker who maybe doesn't understand English idioms, and it doesn't make sense, and they would often look at first language speakers when they're trying to speak and like, I know the words that you're saying, but it doesn't make sense the way that you're using it. And that second language advanced speaker would come in and translate that and say, this is the actual meaning of what they're trying to say, to bridge that gap between the first language speaker and the beginner speakers. So having that bridge is really important to kind of keep the flow of the conversation, ensure that the first language speaker is, the beginner speakers are benefiting from the first language speaker. So our curriculum was natural. We followed the seasons and our ceremonies. Some of our favorite activities were just hanging out and laughing. You know, we would boil down sap around this time and just hang around the fire and laugh and joke and tell stories with each other. Um, so yeah, it was really a natural environment. There were times we were encouraged to carry our notebooks if we were really looking for specific words. We were invited to bring our notebooks and ask the speakers for those words. We could also just listen to stories. If they were a beginner speaker and not quite confident speaking, they would often just listen to advanced and intermediate speakers to pick up new words. We took special trips at points. We would prepare. We would know in advance, about a week in advance, we're going to go pick some blueberries. The speakers and our teachers, our mentors, would tell stories for the week leading up to it, whether that's about their first time berry picking or just some of the cultural, this is what we do in the ceremony, and this is some of the phrases you'll hear during our berry ceremony. And so we would learn not only the language, but also the culture, which is incredibly important, I'm sure you all know. And I think one of the big benefits of being with a first language speaker is that you pick up those cultural idioms that you don't hear in the classroom because you're more structured in the classroom. And so I put it in my resource how surprised I was that one of our phrases for saying that someone has recently passed on is to say that they've gone berry picking. And so you have to be really, really specific about when you use that phrase. And so the outcomes, I really loved our experience. For myself, my son at the time, he was in utero. I was pregnant during my first year, and we were there for a year and a half after he was born. And I really credit that time with him Ganyot Geha being his first language. I don't think I would have been able to accomplish that without our language nest. And it not only created individual speakers, but it created a community of language speakers and learners. I'm still best friends with Gowanago, who was my first teacher. Our boys are still close friends. They were part of the language nest and just grew up with their moms immersed in the language. And so we have a community of language learners, and we have some of the first language speakers of Ganyot Geha and Six Nations in a generation. So I think that's it for me. That's my language learner experience.